Reincarnation is the belief that a person's soul is repeatedly reborn into different bodies after death. This process continues until the soul has reached a state of perfection and merges back with its source, that is God or the universal soul. The determining factor to this perfection is karma. Karma are all the acts, words and thoughts of one's life which supposedly determine a person's fate in their next stage of existence. The bodies one passes in and out of don't need to be human. Good deeds elevate a person's position in the next life. For example, a person may be reborn as a king, whilst bad deeds lower a person's position, so a person may be reborn as a goat. Main arguments of reincarnation have to do with 1. Pantheism, 2. Immortality of the soul, 3. Salvation by works, 4. Law of karma, and 5. The law of cycles. We shall look at these in turn and see the problems they pose. Pantheism. Most religions that embrace reincarnation are pantheistic. This is the belief that God and the universe are the same. In other words, God is everything and everything is God. Or simply stated, all is God and God is all. So a tree is God, a rock is God, the sky is God, the sun is God, the chair is God, and you are God. So pantheists do not believe in a personal or created God. Pantheism doesn't believe in heaven or hell. Instead, physical death is the completion of the cycle of life, a return to nature, and an end to consciousness. Now, if a rock, a fly, a child, and an intellectual adult are all God, how can they all possess the same understanding or wisdom to be God? This clearly shows they cannot be on the same level to claim they are all one God. This would mean that God is one, but dispersed into different levels of understanding, because surely an intellectual adult cannot have the same reasoning ability as a rock. Therefore, all is God and God is all is a contradiction. And this would be more in line with polytheism, or the belief in many gods. If God is the unchanging reality and I am God, since God is everything, including you and me, then why must I go through the long process of reincarnation in order to become enlightened about my own deity? This shows all that is God is imperfect to start off with. And if God is imperfect to start off with, then who or what is the infallible and wise governing authority in the universe that determines or judges what every person, animal or tree will be reborn into? Immortality of the soul. People who believe in reincarnation reason that since the soul is immortal, it cannot die or end, therefore repeatedly moves into a new body. Immortality of the soul doesn't mean that it has to return to a different body. A soul could live in a disembodied state or in a resurrected body designed to live forever. What is the evidence that the soul has to continually live in different bodies? If everything is God and God is everything, where will all the souls go if Earth were completely destroyed, or if some catastrophe wiped out most of the population? Salvation by works. Reincarnation teaches that since God is just and understanding, it is through reincarnation that He demonstrates His grace and love for us by giving us many chances to correct our mistakes in order to become a better soul until someday we become one with Him. However, humans have a reasoning ability that animals don't. There is a difference between learning and reasoning, and there is a difference between reasoning and instinct. A cat, for instance, may learn to touch a cage that has a small bird in it, but can it actually figure out how to take the cage apart so it can get to the bird? Humans have a special sense of reasoning that animals do not, which is why humans have been able to achieve all that they have. So if a person is bad, then according to reincarnation, they will be reborn into a less desirable state, such as a fly. Now, if the purpose of reincarnation is for that bad person to become a better soul, how on earth will they be able to become better, since as a fly they won't have the reasoning ability or understanding to become better? If as a person or as a higher entity with more reasoning ability they couldn't reason and therefore made mistakes, what makes one think that as a fly they will have better understanding to then make things right? Less understanding means more ignorance, and more ignorance means more possibility to do the wrong thing. The only way anything or anyone can become a better soul would be to be reincarnated into an elevated state, for only in an elevated state would they have a better understanding in order to bring correction. Therefore, a very bad person wouldn't have much hope of improvement, for what understanding would he possess as a fly? So reincarnation is a contradiction, because it would mean that the soul of every bad creation would never reach the state of perfection, as it would just keep on being reborn into a lesser desirable state rather than a more elevated state, due to the lack of reasoning ability in every successive former state. If the purpose of reincarnation is to improve the soul, and since this has been going on for thousands of centuries, why are there more ants, an inferior state, than people, a higher state, on the earth today? Also, there are more people on earth today than ever before. So where did all these new souls come from? What is the point of getting punished for something a person can't even remember having done in a previous life? Punishment can only be conscious effective if memory is involved in order to remind a person or thing what they did in a previous life. Other questions that need to be asked. Why does the soul forget its past experiences? What makes the soul's memory stop when the old body dies? If the soul is considered the ultimate self, then why doesn't it remember? And how would a new body limit the soul's ability to remember? Reincarnation is a salvation based on works principle. So if I am God, then why do I need to keep going through centuries of rebirth in order for my soul to reach a state of perfection, in order for it to merge back with the source, that is God or myself, since I also am considered God? Grace means giving someone something they do not deserve. That means an undeserved gift. Reincarnation does not reveal God's grace, because when somebody who has made mistakes is reincarnated to a lower state because of the accumulation of bad karma, this does not display grace, but punishment. However, if someone were to die in your place in order to pay your karmic debt and to set you free from the desires of life and the suffering that results, then that would be a revelation of God's grace. Law of karma. Those that believe in reincarnation argue that the law of karma is the best way to achieve justice. Karma explains why there is evil in creation, and reincarnation offers us the means to transform that evil into good. The problem here is that it doesn't explain the origin of evil, for how did the bad karma originate in the first place? If all is one and one is all, then reincarnation is teaching that there is no ranking order or levels of importance in creation. Who or what then is the all-wise, all-knowing, all-just and infallible one keeping a record that decides or judges to which body you will be sent? Is it the peanut, the cat or the man? And if the man, then which man? And does it make mistakes? Also, what criteria is used? Is it objective, that is, existing outside the mind? Could it be objective? If one's current status as a human or cat or fly is determined by actions in a previous life, then what is the standard? What is considered the more desirable state? A human born into misery and poverty, or a dog living in a mansion with abundant food and being owned by a loving family? It also doesn't explain evil people in this life who are more prosperous than righteous people who are deprived. The idea of being reincarnated into an elevated or a less desirable state violates the concept of creation for purpose. Different animals, regardless of size, taxonomy, or function, have been created to serve different purposes in creation. If the purpose of karma is to rid humanity of its selfish or evil desires over thousands of lifetimes, then why isn't society getting any better? In fact, it's getting worse, with evil on the increase. How does one explain the continual social and economic problems in countries that believe in reincarnation where it has been taught for thousands of years? Living under the law of karma decreases showing love and mercy and acting on conscience. The reason is that it has the effect of causing one to believe they shouldn't have anything to do with lower classes of people who are suffering, such as the poor, blind, or crippled, because these people are living the consequences of their karma from a previous life, and even associating with such people may add to your karmic debt, as you may be helping them to avoid theirs. This is evident in nations like India, where many of the higher social classes or castes think, well, they must have done something terrible in a previous life, therefore it is better to let the law of karma work its way out, and I won't get involved because this may add to my own karmic debt. The irony is that nations who believe this often seek international aid. Therefore, the consequence of reincarnation and karma is increased suffering, causing society to become worse rather than better. And this belief would also cause one to struggle to understand forgiveness by an impersonal God. Law of cycles. Belief in reincarnation follows the universal law of cycles or cyclical patterns found in nature, and is therefore truth. The argument is, everything in life follows the great law of cycles. Seasons come, seasons go, people are born and then they die, plants follow a cyclic pattern of life, and therefore our earthly lives also follow the same cyclical patterns exhibited in nature. History is therefore cyclical rather than moving towards a goal, but eventually someday everything will be reunited as one. Now, the best way to deceive a person is to get them to believe that everything moves in circles, as this creates illusion, rather than movement towards an ultimate goal, because understanding of an ultimate goal would challenge any individual to seek the reason behind the purpose of living and where the future is going. This philosophy of reincarnation is a distortion or misinterpretation on the patterns of nature, because in nature, things that undergo the cyclical pattern remain of the same nature, or they are in a temporal transitory state that eventually elevates to a different state so it can function for the purpose it was designed. For example, a baby becomes a child, then a teenager, and then an adult. But regardless of what phase it's in, it remains a human being. This moves on a timeline and not in a circle. All humans are born babies, and this demonstrates a linear pattern rather than a cyclical one. A seed that falls to the ground and dies as a seed does so it can become a plant which will have the ability to produce many of the same seeds that caused it to grow in the first place. That plant doesn't then become the same seed it started off as. This pattern isn't cyclical, but life through death for the purpose of elevation to produce more fruit. Water that produces rain changes phases, but despite the phase it's in, whether liquid, solid or vapor, it always remains H2O. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly, but in both phases it's still an animal. A season that comes and goes still remains a season. Summer will always be summer and will always start in June and end in August in the northern hemisphere. It doesn't move to October and finish in January, nor does it come back as something different. Therefore, people who believe in reincarnation try to use patterns found in nature to support their argument, but in fact they contradict their claim, because their claim is based on a cyclical pattern, whereas the patterns in nature are transitory but remain of the same nature.